welcome to Cooking with Diane. I'm Diane. Today we're going to talk about how to cut an onion. As with any of my knife skills videos, you're going to need to set yourself up first. You're going to need a large cutting board, an 8-inch chef's knife, a bowl or bucket for your compost or vegetable waste, a bowl to put your chopped vegetables in. A bench knife is helpful for scooping up chopped vegetables but isn't 100% necessary, so use one if you have it. A kitchen towel that you don't mind getting dirty to wipe off your board between vegetables. As a home cook, the two most common ways you'll probably need to chop an onion is either slicing or dicing. Today I'm going to be using yellow onions, which is my preferred type of onion for most cooking purposes. Yellow onions are a little bit sweeter than white onions, but not quite as sweet as Vidalia onions, which have a really high sugar content. They break down easily in most dishes, so they're really great for cooking. Red onions are nice too, but they are sweeter and less pungent than most yellow or white onions, and they will turn your food purple if you put them in a cooked dish. But if you're in a pinch, definitely use whatever type of onion you have. A lot of people struggle with cutting onions. They're notoriously difficult to cut, but if you keep a few things in mind, it'll make your life a lot easier. The first problem a lot of people run into when cutting onion is that it makes you cry. Onions give off a gas when they're cut into that reacts with our eyes and noses and makes us cry. I've heard a lot of tricks to not cry while cutting an onion. Have a fire going next to you while you're chopping. Bite on a wooden stick while you're chopping. Wear goggles. What I found most effective to not crying when I'm chopping onions are a couple things. Number one, fresh onions will release less gas than old onions. Old onions tend to be juicier. Number two, keep your onions in the refrigerator. They don't have to be refrigerated, but coldness will slow down the gas coming out of the onion and therefore will give you more time before you start crying. Number three, when I wear my contact lenses, I don't seem to cry as much. Obviously, that only works if you have contact lenses to wear. Number four, cut your onion quickly and efficiently using a sharp knife. The longer you're chopping your onion and hacking at it with a dull knife and creating all this onion juice on your board, the longer you're being exposed to those gases that are going to make you cry. And that's what I'm going to show you here today. However, if you do start crying while chopping an onion and you're having a hard time seeing because you're crying so much, put down the knife, step away from the board, go to the bathroom, get yourself together, splash water on your face, blow your nose, do whatever you need to do. When you come back, it'll probably be a little bit better. So let's talk about the anatomy of an onion. So this is an onion. There is actually a top and bottom to your onion. The top is what kind of looks like a papery flag. The bottom is the part that looks really hairy and gnarly. It's important to remember which is the top and which is the bottom. The bottom might also be known as the root end. I'm just going to call it the bottom today. If you're wanting to cut onion rings, obviously you'll want to keep the whole onion intact when you peel it. Otherwise, we're going to cut the whole thing in half before we peel it. Before I cut the onion in half, I'm going to chop off the top, and then I'm going to chop off the bottom. Remember which was the top and which was the bottom. You can look at them now to see the difference. As you go, get rid of any little papers or compost that are on your board so they don't end up in your chopped onion. I keep a compost bucket nearby. You can also save these scraps for stock. Once the top and the bottom are cut off, put the flat side on your board so the onion's not rolling around, and cut the whole thing in half, top to bottom. Now it's a lot easier to take off the skin than if I had tried to take off the skin when the onion was whole, because I have an opening. I take off the whole first layer of skin and not just the papery parts. So you'll have the papery parts off, but you'll also have one layer of skin that's kind of tough and leathery. The rest of your onion should feel smooth and not slippery. If there's a little thin, slippery film on the onion at this point, take that off too. So we're going to work with 1/2 of the onion at a time. 1/2 I'm going to slice, and 1/2 I'm going to dice. To make sure your slices aren't all sticking together at one end, you want to get rid of the root. That's the bottom. So if you see one part of the onion at the bottom that's kind of harder looking, just cut it off. That part's optional, but it will make slices that come apart more easily. When you're slicing an onion to cook, like in a sauté or in a stew, you want to slice with the lines of the onion. So you don't want to cut across the onion and make those pretty rainbow slices. You actually want to cut with the lines of the onion, because this will make all of your slices the same size. Remembering to hold your knife up by the blade and to curl your fingers in with the flat side of the onion down. Just slice down and forward with the lines of the onion. And if you keep the tip of your knife on the board, you can control more easily whether you make really thin slices or kind of thick slices, depending on what you're cooking. If slices are piling up and getting in your way as you work, just take a second, move them to the side so they're out of your way. When you come to the last little piece of onion, it might get hard to keep holding it with your bear claw. So just tip it over, because there's a bigger flat side where you've just been chopping, and you should be able to finish the job. You should be able to separate all of the little slices into individual pieces, and they should all be about the same size. So here are my onion slices. I'm going to use my bench knife to get these out of the way. Now let's talk about dicing. Dicing an onion is a little bit more difficult because we're making tiny little squares out of something that is large and round. An added challenge when dicing onions as opposed to other vegetables is that they have all these layers that want to come apart while you're trying to dice it. But if you're methodical and efficient while dicing your onion and you have a sharp knife, it should be a lot easier. The main thing you want to remember when dicing an onion is you want to keep the root end, the bottom, intact. That means we're not going to cut through it until the very end. So we took the root out when we were slicing onions, but we're keeping the root on when we're dicing onions. Another thing you want to think about when you're dicing onions is how big do you want your dice to be? If you're having a hard time visualizing inches, you can even use your fingers as a measurement tool. You can say, okay, I want the dice to be as big as my thumbnail, or I want the dice to be as big as this knuckle. So visualize the size you want your onion to be, because that will actually determine how many slices you make when you're dicing your onion. The smaller you want your pieces, the more slices you're going to make. Finally, we want to think about the fact that an onion is a three-dimensional object, so we're going to cut it in 3 directions. First direction, horizontal. Second direction, vertical with the lines of the onion. Third direction, vertical across the onion. So for our horizontal cut, we want to be able to hold our knife horizontally rather than like this. So in order to do that and not have our hand banging into the cutting board, we want our hand to be all the way off the cutting board. So we're going to bring the onion all the way back to the end of our board. You're going to cut horizontally into the top end of the onion and towards the bottom of the onion. So the top end is here where my knife is. The bottom end is here away from my knife. Make sure to keep your fingers out of the way. So in this case, because we're cutting horizontally, instead of your bear claw, you actually want to hold the onion down with your palm and keep your fingers up and out of the way. Cut into the top end and towards the bottom end. You can use a little bit of a sawing motion, but it's more of a push. And then stop about here. Your knife should be about a ½ inch away from the root end. We're not going to cut through the bottom end of the onion. Then make another slice. And again, stop before the knife goes all the way through the onion. Whatever size you've decided to make your slices, they should be an even distance apart. So my slices are all about ½ inch apart. Next, we're going to cut with the lines of the onion. We're not holding our knife horizontal anymore, so we can move our onion back to a comfortable space in the middle of our board. For this, you want the tip of the knife to come about a ½ inch away from the root end. So unlike other slicing motions where we go all the way through the onion, in this case, we start here and just chop straight down. Even though the onion is curved, there's no need to hold your knife at an angle, just chop straight down. And make sure your slices are the distance away that you want the size of your onion. I'm making ½ inch pieces, so I'm making my slices a ½ inch apart from each other. At this point, some little pieces might come out of your onion. These little pieces are escapees. It's okay, don't panic. You haven't messed anything up. Just push them to the side so they're out of your way. So now I've cut the onion in 2 directions. I just have to finish the job and cut across these sticks that I've made. Now the onion might be trying to fall apart a little bit, so we're going to keep it together with our thumb and our pinky. We're going to hold the 2 sides of the onion to hold the onion together into one solid piece. And then with our other 3 fingers, curl them in, bear claw. Now just cut across, and your dice should just fall off the onion. Now again, we're at the last quarter of the onion. It's hard to hold on to it. It's important not to panic. At this point, you can just tip the onion over and cut it into small dice. So I just cut in one direction, turn it, and cut across. Take a look at what you've made. Make sure you don't have any stray pieces of onion skin or anything in there. If any pieces look especially big to you, you can chop them down. The more you practice, the better you'll get at this. So try this out. It's gonna feel really weird at first if you're not used to doing it. But the more you practice, the better you'll get, I promise. Thanks so much for watching. If this was helpful to you, check out my other knife skills videos and keep practicing.